All right, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, which is right here, and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Rosary Girls by Richard Montanari. Montanari. Richard Montanari. Okay, so this book came out in 2005. This is book number 1 in Richard Montanari's Kevin Brine and Jessica Balzano mystery series. I think there's about 9 books in the series so far. So this came out in 2005. I remember reading this book back in 2005 when it first came out and absolutely loving it. And then forgetting about it. Just forgetting about it, other than I loved it. And then I kept looking. For years, I was like, what was the name of that book that I loved? I know that the guy's last name was Montana. So I'd always type into Montana, mystery novel, Montana, book about girls, Catholic schoolgirls getting killed, Montana, but I could never find it. And then I realized one day I was kind of nosing around in the bookstore, at a used bookstore, and I saw the book. This book, to be exact. And I was like, it's Montanari. It's not Montana. It's Richard Montanari, or Montanari. I don't know how it's pronounced. Let's say Montanari. Richard Montanari. The cover is dope. I remembered that from when I read it a long time ago. And I was like, okay, I found the book. Let's research this author. So I found out that this is book number 1 in his, like I said, Kevin Brine, Jessica Balzano mystery series. From what I recalled when I read this previously, it was much like Dennis Lehane's Kenzie and Gennaro series. So if you've ever read those books, which are some of my favorites, you'll know the kind of the flavor we're doing. We've got Kenzie and Gennaro by Lehane set up in Boston. We've got Brine and Balzano set in the dirty, mean, grim streets of Philadelphia. And man, does Richard Montanari capture that, just the flavor of Philadelphia. He captures it every bit as well as Dennis Lehane captures the flavor of Boston. We were talking about the cover. Let's go over the cover. You know, I love graphic design and cover illustrations. This cover is just absolutely sparkly, shiny goodness. I love everything about it. So why isn't this series, why was it so hard for me to find? Okay, I don't know why some mystery series just take off like James Patterson and reach the stratosphere of billions of readers, and why other mystery series that I think are really super dope and quite frankly better than Patterson just don't ever reach those heights. I don't, because this book deserves, and Richard Montanari deserves every bit the readership that Michael Connelly gets, or Lee Child gets, or C.J. Box gets, or any of those mystery writers that are just selling gazillion stuff. That's why this was hard for me to find and hard for me to rediscover. It's because it's just sort of one of those series that just sort of floats under the radar when it really should not. This is, we'll just start with the prologue. It has one of the most elegant and elegant and frightening prologues I've ever read. And it's of a teenage girl. She's praying in a chapel, but there's hints within the writing that she might be kidnapped and she might be about to die. But it's sort of left vague, and you're left wondering. And then we jump to a scene with our main character, Kevin Brine, who is sort of a disgraced detective in Philadelphia. And he's disgraced because he's got a great track record of always capturing the bad guys. But he made a mistake. In one of his previous, 4 or 5 years ago things, he had pinpointed the wrong guy. He was sure that he'd found the killer, and he had just made that guy's life miserable. It was just a young kid, too. He'd made that person's life miserable to the point where they committed suicide. He just kept hounding him and hounding him and hounding him, knowing for a fact that that was the killer. Well, then the kid committed suicide, and then comes to find out that that kid wasn't the killer, that the real killer came forth and confessed or something like that, or was caught later on. And so now Brian is just weighed down with this guilt of being such a tenacious investigator that he just hounded that kid to death, literally to death. And it really weighs heavy on him, and he's kind of got a black mark on his career. And so we jump to this prologue where he is now tracking down a child predator, and he goes undercover in disguise. And the child predator has hired a bodyguard, and it's just a really cool scene in the dark, dirty streets of Philadelphia that takes place right there in the beginning of the story. Right after that delicious prologue, then we get this Kevin Bryan in disguise dealing with the child molester, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I won't tell you how that scene ends, but it's well worth reading. And then we jump to the fact that Brian's previous partner has suffered a heart attack and likely won't rejoin the force, so Brian has to get a new partner, and he gets new rookie detective Jessica Balzano. Now, Jessica Balzano is she's divorced. She's got a 3-year-old daughter. Her first day on the job with her new partner Brian. So we've got the seasoned veteran Brian and the new pretty, really cute, good-looking Jessica Balzano. Now they are partnered together, and their first case is, we jump to the prologue with the girl praying in the church. Turns out that she was killed, and she was ritually killed, and the thing that was left on her body by the serial killer was a rosary with some beads missing and some other cryptic things. That's why it's called the Rosary Girls. Because now Balzano and Brian, they have to stop the serial killer because he's got a list of people that he's going to be killing, and they're all young girls. And it's just, there's so many heartbreaking scenes in here, especially when Balzano and Brian have to go tell the father of the young girl that his daughter has been killed. He called her in missing the previous night, and now they have to tell him that she's been killed. And it's just such a gut-wrenching scene. And Richard Montanari wrote that scene so, I was just into that scene, and I could just see the way that father was reacting, and the police reaction to his reaction. It was all just so heartbreaking, and you really started to feel for all the characters involved. And then we get to a third, so Brian and Balzano rotate telling the chat, like we get to see the story through both of their eyes alternately. And then we get a third guy we get to see the story through his eyes, and that is Simon Close, the reporter that's starting to report on these serial killers, because Balzano and Brian, they end up finding more young teenage Catholic schoolgirls dead in different poses with the rosary clue left. And it's just such a well-written mystery novel. I couldn't believe, I was like, I read this again in one sitting, just being like, yeah, I remember reading this. I don't remember much about it. I just remember how awesome it was. And my instinct was right. Rereading it, it was just so fucking awesome. So now my question is, not only the best parts of this book are actually told from the serial killer's perspective. I forgot that there is one other perspective. And there's these interludes between about every other chapter, and they're only about a page long each. But they're these creepy interludes of the killer's musings and kind of why he's doing what he's doing. And they're the most poetic parts of the book. And they're just absolutely gorgeous and delicious to read in a very, very evil way. I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, I was just like, man, this thing is seriously gothic. Seriously gothic. And grim. And just Philadelphia just comes to life under the wordsmithing of Richard Montanari. It's just absolutely wonderful. So now I'm faced with the choice. Do I collect the rest of the series? I think, like I said, I think there's 8 or 9 books in the Brian Balzano mystery series. Do I go ahead and search out the rest and buy them? So we'll see. And I think odds are that I will, just because this is an absolutely 10 out of 10 mystery novel, and I'm so glad that I relocated it after so many years of thinking that the guy's last name was Montana. The only thing I could find on Montana was stuff about that TV show Yellowstone, and some guy that played quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. But anyway, I give this a 10 out of 10. I'm so glad that I reread this, found it again in the used bookstore, and I will probably more than likely be buying the rest of the books in the series, because I really want to follow the adventures of Brian and Balzano in Philadelphia, just the same way that I followed the adventures of Kenzie and Gennaro in Boston. Can't wait, folks.